YouTube, Awesome Writer here. Welcome to my long-awaited ranking of every Power Rangers team-up ever so far. This is my conclusion to my long-running team-up rewind review series. I'm really sorry about how long this video took. There was a bunch of circumstances surrounding it. I mean, the series in general, if you don't remember, started as a lead-up to the Dino team-up back in Beast Morphers Season 2. And if this is actually uploading on time, it's going to be during Dino Fury Season 2. And I just kind of underestimated how long it would take to put the videos out, not to mention things like new news videos and new toy videos taking priority, not to mention other life stuff. And I really wanted to take my time on the videos. They took more work than I thought they would. And I also wanted to always make sure that when I rewatched the episode, I actually wanted to watch it and wasn't doing it as an obligation to keep my opinions sort of clear. So I'm really sorry about how long this took. I actually recorded this once on my old camera and decided to redo it since it had been so long. But before we get started, I know I've had a lot of preamble, so I'm sorry. I'll put a timestamp so you can just skip the nonsense. But before we get started, I just want to say two things. Number one, I want to thank everyone that watched this series and expressed interest in it and always asked when the new episodes were coming out. And all the people that have asked when this video was coming out, I appreciate seeing that people were enjoying it. I hope to do more videos like this in the future. I actually have some stuff maybe pseudo-planned for the anniversary year. We'll see. Also, number two is my just general thing I say before each one of these videos, that this is just my personal list. I'm not saying this is the right list, or I'm trying to say this is the objective best list. It's just my personal opinion. Actually, the only other thing I want to say is in regards to my criteria of what I personally enjoy about the team-ups, in case you're wondering, is for me, the number one thing is I like to see good interactions between the characters. I could care less about dumb fights and explosions and people standing next to each other. I can picture that all in my head. I like to see good interactions between the characters, whether it's personalities that clash, humorous personalities that complement each other, or even a mentorship role. I also really like to see, especially in regards to team-ups between present and past series, a storyline that really cleverly weaves together the stories and mythologies. And also, though, I do enjoy a good fight that will make use of the two teams teaming up together that can be fun, creative, and memorable. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to try to keep each of these concise. So, coming in at the bottom, for me personally, is Grid Connection. Oddly enough, the core Dino team-up that this very video series was supposed to lead up to. I would say that there's probably videos on this, or team-ups on this that are better objectively as team-ups, but this episode for me personally just represents everything I hate about team-ups and modern team-ups, which is just, doesn't matter, they stood next to each other, and there were bright colors and explosions. The lead up to this was actually surprisingly good. I had pretty much no expectations or hype for this team up, and then they surprisingly had a really good lead into this, even with a nice kind of mini Dino Charge only team up. And so it was weird that I had no expectations and then suddenly had some expectations only for them to be pulled away. I would say the only part I liked about this really was the last sentiment by Jason about how there would always be Rangers like you to kind of take up the mantle. I thought that was a nice sentiment. Kind of funny now, considering all the stuff going on with Austin St. John, but that was really the only thing I liked. It just, for me personally, represents everything I dislike about modern Toku team-ups, so it made the bottom of the list. After that is The Poise Show, which was effectively a mini Dino Charge Ninja Steel team-up that was also, I believe, the very last episode, as well as a clip show. I'll say that I thought the premise of it, of Poisandra taking over the old, arena base was cool, and the idea of getting to see the Sudasha brothers team up was cool because it was kind of a nice point in history, having these two brothers back-to-back on seasons that were Blue Rangers as well as fans, so I did enjoy that. I just overall have a deep hatred for Poisandra and found much of the episode to be annoying. Not to mention, it just wasn't that great of an episode. It actually had a lot of potential for a really good episode with the whole, Sudasha brothers thing, but it's just not my thing. After that is A Friend in Need, which was the Masked Rider mmpr team-up. This one's weird on the list because it's one of only, I think, two on the list that isn't two Ranger teams or more teaming up with each other, and it was actually sort of to be a backdoor pilot with Masked Rider, even though they wound up cutting ties with the PR mythology, so it was weird. It wasn't an awful episode, it just doesn't have what I personally enjoy about team-ups, which is usually the interaction, mainly because you're interacting with someone we're just meeting, so there's no excitement there. It was a fine episode. I think it could have been one episode shorter and they could have cut the Kimberly stuff out, but it's really just not up there with what I'm expecting to see out of team-ups. Then is Shell Shocked, which is the only other one on this list, I believe, that is a team-up between PR and a non-PR character set, which is the TMNT team-up, our first TMNT team-up before the comic. This one is not that great, but I wouldn't say it's as awful as the fans make it seem. There's a couple on this list that fans just really hate, and while they're not great, I think the over amount of hatred sets you up to think it's going to be really bad, and then it's not. And that's kind of how I feel about this episode. Was it that great? No. I have found it to be personally kind of harmless, though. Like, I always thought it was just, this is an enjoyable-ish episode. The certified turtified part with Deca, I always thought was fun. There was a couple fun bits. It was just kind of a harmless, average episode that obviously had a lot more potential. It's very low on my list. Almost everything else on this list I just enjoy more, but I just wanted to highlight that I don't think it's as bad. Like, the fandom will make you think your eyes will bleed when watching it, and that will not happen. After that, Samurai Surprise, which this is one that people were not upset about, but weren't sure whether I should count as the team-up reviews alongside the Jungle Fury one, since it's more of a cameo episode. But I was kind of including everything that was any sort of team-up. And this was actually one of the stronger episodes of Super Megaforce. I did like seeing Jaden and the mentor role he took on. I liked briefly seeing G, but despite it being one of the stronger episodes in one of the weaker PR series, it's not that great of a team-up episode because there's really no teaming up. It's more of a cameo mentor situation. With that being said, I prefer seeing cameo and mentor situations than fighting in bright colors and explosions, so it's kind of up my alley to that degree. But it certainly could have been a lot more. Even if Jaden never fought alongside the Rangers, there could have been more extended role for him and G. But it was a solid episode of Super Megaforce, but definitely one of the weaker team-ups. Then, Finders Keepers, which was the episode I just mentioned earlier, which was technically the first part in the Dino Team-Up trilogy. You had this episode, and then you had the Villain Clip Show, and then Grid Connection. And this episode took me by surprise, because there was rumors at the time that it was going to be 1 episode, 3 episodes, all over the place. We didn't know how long or when the Dino Team-Up was going to happen, and suddenly this just happened amongst the international airings, and it was a surprisingly enjoyable episode. It definitely lacked in some interesting and fun interactions between the teams, but it was an overall solid episode that created good momentum into what ended up being a disappointing episode. But it was really nice to build some momentum there, have an unexpected time to get some establishment of the Dino Fury or the Dino Charge Rangers teaming up with the Beast Morphers Rangers. Not to mention this storyline also built off of the episodes that came previously in Beast Morphers, which was nice. Then on the list is Rangers of Two Worlds, which I actually think is a pretty decent two-parter for Power Rangers. And it has a weird place in history because part of its existence was meant to write out Billy's character because David Yost left the series unceremoniously for kind of bad behind-the-scenes reasons. But as a little kid, I did not know this. And if I kind of take all that knowledge out of my head, this is a pretty solid set of episodes, honestly. One thing I do like about this episode as far as a team-up goes is I think setting aside the circumstances for the reason the plot exists, it's actually a pretty good plot for setting up a team-up between the Alien Rangers and Zeo, because it kind of involves the storyline that Billy aged himself up to work with the Alien Rangers with this machine, and now he's aging because of it, and they need the Alien Rangers giving the chance for the team-up. Like, if you didn't know that was the reason David Yost was being written out, it's a pretty clever premise for the team-up, which I liked. I also liked getting to see the Alien Rangers team up with the Zeo Rangers because everything was interconnected back then. And they were kind of responsible for getting the old team back on their feet into the Zeo powers, and so it was like them seeing the fruits of their labor and finally getting to team up with the adult versions of the Rangers. With that being said, even though I think these are 2 pretty solid Zeo episodes, it's not really, doesn't include a lot of the things I personally enjoy about team-up episodes. It didn't have a lot of memorable fights with the Rangers teaming up, and it also didn't have that many interactions that were memorable. It was a different one too, because it was weird because it was back when PR was all interconnected and it wasn't that special to see these casts interact. Alright, then you have Legendary Battle Extended Edition, another much hated episode because there was so much hype. Definitely Super Megaforce was a season that could have been so much more, but the fan expectations were also kind of out of the atmosphere. I think there was kind of a middle ground. When it comes to this episode, I actually think it's kind of a kick-ass finale. Honestly, if you take away any expectations, it's a pretty fun watch. I feel like the kids watching this that didn't have any fandom expectations or hang up probably thought it was pretty fun. And I really personally liked the cameos in this and how they were handled. I loved the scenes of the Rangers rescuing with the helmet overlay. I liked the final scene of all the Rangers showing up. That being said, much like everything else, it could have been so much more. It was kind of awkward how it seemed like the Rangers were coming at the end just to help them fight the leftover putties. You know, it could have been a lot better. I honestly, personally don't mind this episode, but there's a lot better team-up episodes that actually have some more team-up action and team-up interaction. Coming up next is Time for Lightspeed. I honestly find this to just be the most generic team-up on this list. I wouldn't say it's bad. I wouldn't say it's great. It was just surprisingly generic. It's one of the ones I remembered the least going into the rewatch, and I kind of realized why. I feel like it's just really kind of rushed there and lacking, but not bad. I really just wish there had been a little bit more to it and some more memorable interactions between the casts. Probably controversial to put this above anything, really, for a lot of people, but is Clash of the Red Rangers, which was a mini team-up between the RPM Ranger Series Red and Power Ranger Samurai. This team-up took me by surprise because I didn't even know it was going to exist, like, especially since Saban had brought it back and it seemed like they were doing their whole new thing, trying to bring back old PR, distancing from what PR had become. So we didn't expect this to exist, period. And it wound up being pretty solid. Honestly, way more enjoyable than I thought it would be, and it holds up, if not gets better upon rewatches for me personally. I think especially it actually kind of had some really nice interactions with RPM Red and the rest of the cast that kind of highlighted the differences in their styles and the worlds they come from. And oddly enough, despite him just being a helmeted voice actor, they had some better interactions than some team-ups where they actually have the cast there. And it was one of my favorite things about team-ups, which is highlighted the sort of differences and similarities between the characters and seeing them bond. And I appreciated that even more this go-around. Then there's True Blue to the Rescue, another non-traditional mini team-up between Justin from Turbo and the Space Rangers. Again, like Rangers of Two Worlds, weird because it's part of that era when things were interconnected, so it wasn't like seeing two worlds collide, it was just about already having a mixed world. I found this to be a pretty enjoyable episode, and I honestly just liked that they wanted to give Justin closure. I know that he's not everyone's favorite, he's not necessarily my favorite either, but I appreciated that they gave closure to his character and allowed us to have this little mini team-up, as well as a bit of an expansion on the lore with him getting his morpher from Mountain Blaster, or is it Storm Charger? Storm Shape? Whatever one it was. Mountain Blaster is a Zord, whichever one it was. It kind of set up TJ for having his morpher in your headcanon for Forever Ed. Then is Spirit of the Tiger, the other non-team-up on this list that's more of a mentor cameo. Again, I think this is one of the stronger episodes in Super Megaforce. Actually, I think it's the strongest episode in Super Megaforce. I think they made great use of Casey. I wish they would have made use of Jaden in this style. I thought they did a really good job of making it feel like a natural extension of where the character would be. You know, even though he didn't suit up with the Rangers, it personally contained stuff that I like about team-ups, which is seeing the characters interact from previous series and maybe even see them impart some knowledge being a veteran Ranger. And I just thought it was a really nice episode, and I enjoy it. Then, probably controversial to have high up on this list, or at least this high on this list, is Drakina's Revenge. This is another team-up that gets a lot of heat for a lot of various reasons, and it's understandable in several ways, but I think it's very overhated. Not in the sense that it's an underrated gem, but in the sense that, much like Shell Shocked, you see so much venom being spewed at it, that when you actually watch it, I feel I'm surprised by it not being that bad. It's one that I watched a lot, because I think it came with like this free VHS thing, so I watched it a lot when I was younger, and I always liked it fine. Like, revisiting it later, I did notice a lot of the problems, both before and after they were pointed out to me, but it's definitely not as bad as you would think. You definitely notice weird stuff like Leo not being there sometimes, but I would say it's fine. I actually really like the premise for it in terms of the team-up. Like I said, that's one of the things I like about team-ups that will make them good for me, is if the premise does a really good job of sort of uniting the two stories, and I really did like that. It actually had some fun interactions and moments. Certainly not the best, a bit of a mess, but more enjoyable than it's given credit for sometimes, I think. Then we have Dimensions in Danger, which I think is a very underrated team-up special. This is another one where, kind of like with Grid Connection, or rather the episodes leading up to it, I had very little expectation, and so when something was good, I was very surprised that it was good. I had pretty much no like real hype or expectations for this, and it was a lot better than I thought it would be, and a lot better, period. I think it gets a lot of hate because it does tend to solely focus on Tommy, or mostly focus on Tommy, but if you take that out of the equation, it did some really cool stuff. I like that it got Rangers from all different periods of time. As a side personal note, I like that it was only the Rangers that were there that teamed up and not a bunch of soulless, empty suits there. I liked some of the interactions we got between them when they were there. Sure, more could have been done with them. A nice two-parter highlighting more of the cast would have been great, but for what we had, it was cool to have this cast. I also thought the introduction of the Master Morpher and how it wound up tying into Soul of the Dragon, even though we still don't know where it came from. Where is it? Where is it? Also, where's the toy? This is the Bandai timeline we would have it. Because without a Master Morpher, we're nothing but a cheap copy. Setting aside the connection to the comic even, that was a really cool, unexpected thing. Setting aside even the comic connection of it all, I thought the Master Morpher was a really freaking cool idea, and if you set aside your sort of hate for Tommy, I thought it was a cool way to celebrate something that's unique about Power Rangers, which is these characters with a longer Ranger history that take up multiple mantles, and Tommy is obviously the pinnacle of that. And for me, I saw it as something that sort of celebrated that, and it kind of retroactively answered why he had multiple powers in Super Megaforce. Still want to know where that Morpher came from, though. Then on the list is Forever Red. This is a huge fan favorite episode, a lot of people's top 5, top 1 team up. I personally do enjoy it. There's a lot of iconic moments, a lot of enjoyable moments. I also really enjoy the premise and how it sort of connected several different threads from the past and made it feel like one of those classic Zordon era interconnected narratives. But it's definitely also kind of rushed, and I feel like I never just liked it as much as the fandom. And in one way it's kind of unexplainable, but in another, I feel that maybe back then when I first watched it, it still felt like PR was much more of an interconnected thing, so it wasn't so exciting to see people back at the time as it would be later. I don't know. I like the episode, it just always has been kind of like, yeah, that was cool, but it's kind of rushed. But I understand why it was rushed from the behind-the-scenes reasons. But it's always just been fine. Like, Forever Red was fine. Then you have Wormhole, No One Gets Inside. Nuff said. No, this was an enjoyable episode. I actually kind of like that for Dino Thunder and SPD, it seemed like when they had the writers' room meeting, they're like, okay, for a team up, we have one team in the future, one in the past. What do we do? Who travels to meet each other? Should we go Dino Thunder Rangers in the future or SPD Rangers in the past? And they say yes, and they did one of each. It was just kind of an enjoyable episode to see the SPD Rangers travel back in time and sort of try to make it seem like it was during the Dino Thunder era, and you have that one of the more iconic and memorable fights. Not to mention, it sets up the Jeffrey Perazzo voicing JDF, which means he can now voice every Ranger in history for any team-ups they need. If we do mmpr animated, I don't want a single mmpr cast member reprising. I just want Jeffrey Perazzo voicing them all. Always a Chance is up next, the sort of team-up return of Adam. It's weird because this is kind of like the Super Megaforce ones, where you just have one Ranger returning in a mentor role, except he actually does suit up to fight alongside this time. This episode was even better than I remembered. It was really nice to catch up with Adam a little bit in this interconnected era and see him play this mentor role and help Carlos's arc. And it was also kind of cool and weird, not weird, but it was just kind of a funny thing that he passed the mantle to Carlos as a Green Ranger, but he started as a Black Ranger, and now he's coming back as a Black Ranger to mentor Carlos as a Black Ranger. I don't know, I just thought that was kind of neat. And it had a lot more depth than I thought it would, and was just a really great little mini team-up mentor episode. History is up next. I feel like a lot of people would probably choose the other SPD Dino Thunder team-up because of No One Gets Inside, but I personally always just really enjoy rewatching this episode. I loved the kind of competitiveness between the two teams. I thought it added a fun flair to the team-up because it wasn't a fight, like an idiotic fight over a easily cleared up misunderstanding, but it kind of created this fun rivalry, and yet there was some fun civilian fights with it. They brought back the Dino Thunder score. We also got an update on what the Dino Thunder Rangers were doing. It's also refreshing to see Rangers not get along kumbaya so much because we've been in this Neo Saban era where everyone's a Pleasantville mannequin, so then I appreciate in retrospect characters that act like human beings then. So I don't know. I just always, personally, really enjoyed watching this episode. And then I have, on the list I wrote it is To the 10th Power of Pink, which is To the 10th Power and Power of Pink, which is sort of the two-parter between Lost Galaxy and In Space, but they're individual episodes, but they work as a two-parter. I feel like the fight against the Psycho Rangers could have been its own two-parter, and I wish that wasn't so rushed and then had a third part. But setting that aside, I think this is one of the most iconic team-ups, because the Psycho Rangers made a great premise for these two teams to connect, but it also was one of the only team-ups to have a ripple effect throughout the entire rest of the current season, which was Lost Galaxy, as it led to the arc with Corone becoming the Pink Ranger, which was a further connection, and it led to one of our first, I think only Ranger death, even though she came back, but still, it's a great set of episodes that has actual impact, which was amazing. Reinforcements from the Future next, another one in a lot of people's top 5, and it's easy to see why. Easily one of the best team-ups. It kind of was a good checklist of all the things I like about team-ups, which was some good, memorable team-up action between them, which is not number 1 on the list. Great interactions between the past and present cast, as well as a nice update on the Time Force cast or the previous cast. And they really blended it all together nicely, blending together the mythology and serving as almost even more of an epilogue to Time Force as it was a team-up. It's just a really great mix of what my ideal team-up is between a past and present season. After that is Thunderstorm. I could argue that Reinforcements for the Future is a better checklist, as I mentioned, of things I like to see from these type of team-ups, but Thunderstorm I just plain enjoy watching more. Rangers were under a spell to fight the Dino Thunder Rangers, which is a Rangers fighting, but again, at least it's not over an idiotic Toku misunderstanding. But it created, again, this fun antagonism, and rewatching it during the Neo-Saban-ish era where everyone's kumbaya, it was nice that the Rangers were actually kind of antagonistic. Like they knew they were under a spell, but they still snarked back at them. They weren't like, "It's not their fault, don't be mean to them." Like, it was fun. It was a fun rivalry, fun reason for them to fight that wasn't stupid. I liked the cast interactions when we got them both before and after the spell. Really fun, memorable, classic Disney wire fu team-up fight at the end. I also liked that they included the supporting cast. The fun little nod to the whole Cassidy situation was fun. It's just, even though I think Reinforcements of the Future might check more boxes in that regard of things I like to see in terms of a more deep team-up, I just love the hell out of watching this one. Number one on this, as you may have guessed from any previous video I've done talking about it, is Once a Ranger. I just love this team-up. I know it has its flaws. I addressed kind of in-depth its flaws and my opinion on it in the review, so I'll link that obviously somewhere here. It'll be in the playlist so you can check that out. But I personally just love this one. I know that we kind of lifted the idea from Sentai. I mean, the whole idea, period, is lifted from Sentai. But the idea of sort of a returning team of random Rangers rather than a Forever Red. But I love the way it was used here to make an actual team of veteran Rangers that served in place of the Overdrive team for a time. I would love a comic series that maybe showed more of their unseen adventures. That was a cool idea. I loved all the cast they got back. I loved their intros with their theme music playing, the civilian fight with the theme music playing, the final fight. I loved Adam's theme. It was just so awesome and iconic, and I got chills watching it, and I still do to this day. And it was also one of the last times I was excited by a team-up because it was in an era before we did so many team-ups or talked about team-ups so much, like it was all we ever talked about, and it was back when it was like this special Christmas, and it was truly exciting. And I just loved everything about it. But that is it for my list, guys. Again, thanks to those of you that enjoyed this series. I hope to do more like this in the future. As always, also let me know your personal list in the comments. Next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps, ring that bell so you get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.